Well, it's good to be with you today. Shout out to all the grandparents. Literally best club ever, am I right? I've been in a lot of clubs in my life, a lot of groups in my life, but being a grandparent is like hands down my favorite club to be in. It's really great. And interestingly enough, kind of the logic of being a grandparent sort of fits into some of the things that we'll talk about today. I remember my dad saying to me after I had my first son, said, you know, if I'd known that being a grandparent was this good, I'd have had them first. And I didn't know what that meant exactly. It didn't sound good for me, but I now know what he meant by it. My son routinely tells people, I look forward to the day that my son actually gets to meet my dad. Whoever this guy is, I don't recognize him whatsoever. And he's right, 100%. I have lost my spine and all my dignity. My grandkids can ask me anything. My granddaughter walked up and asked for my car. I would just start, digging my keys out. And so I get it. This really remarkable kind of affection that goes with that particular relationship is remarkable. And it helps to bring clarity to this rather frightening text. I remember the first time I read this text. I became a Christian when I was up in New York. I was raised in church with my mom and dad were very faithful, reading my brother and I the Bible each night, things like that. But I became an atheist. I didn't find any real appeal to Christianity. I found no real appeal to God. It all seemed very much manufactured. It seemed like just simply an extension, a baptized extension of what it was to be a Southerner, blue-collar, working-class, kind of kid. So I didn't see any real serious, truth or reality to it. And then I was in New York reading the Bible for the first time myself, and was reading through Matthew 5, 6, and 7, which this text I'm reading today is the end, the culmination of that big sermon, 3 chapters long. And I just remember realizing that if I could become perfect from that point forward, which my past would dictate that the chances of that were very, very much impossible. But if I could, then everything in my past screamed for my condemnation. And at the same time, while reading that, I also realized that I wasn't being shown that to condemn me. I was being shown that to save me from me. That idea became really prominent in these texts. But as I was reading these texts, getting to the end of that sermon and hitting this text was terrifying. And I started reading when I was a little kid. I was prolific as a reader, and by the time I was in the 7th or 8th grade, I'd read everything that I was ever going to read in high school. I read just all the time, and so I read scary stuff. It was the 1970s, right? Stephen King was coming out. My mom would not let Stephen King in the house. She thought Stephen King was satanic. Not unreasonable, but he was. But my library had it at school, so I would read Stephen King, and it was scary, but it was kind of a fun scary. When I read this text, this was not fun scary. This was scary. Let me read you the text. It begins in verse 21 of chapter 7 of Matthew. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, cast out demons in your name, do many mighty works in your name? And then I, Jesus, will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Casting out demons, doing miracles and prophesying, workers of lawlessness. I never knew you. There is a way to do all of these remarkable things and still not be known by Jesus. I remember that was terrifying. That was a horrifying idea. Because in my mind, I still really didn't understand Christianity. I was really new to it, and so there was a part of me that really did believe that what I did contributed in some way to my salvation. I wouldn't have said that because I'd been trained not to say things like that. But I remember I went to my pastor and asked him about it. Hey, what in the world does this mean? And my pastor was a great guy, but not terribly helpful. And he was like, Jeff, have you ever prayed the prayer? I was like, what? Yeah, I've prayed the prayer, but I've never cast out demons, prophesied, or done miracles. That feels important. And these are workers of lawlessness. He goes, as long as you prayed the prayer. I get what he was trying to say. It was just the wrong answer for that particular question. The real question is, who is the one who does the will of my Father in heaven? What is that? And in this sermon, this massive sermon, Jesus preaches to specifically the religious. Religious people are the focus of this sermon. And the fact of the matter is in the first century, everybody was religious. There wasn't any such thing as secular. That concept really isn't in the Bible. That's very much a kind of a post-enlightenment concept. But these religious people, though, were embedded in their own self-righteousness. If there was a theme to this sermon, it would be this: Jesus rescues the slave to religious self-righteousness. Because in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, there are two ways to live. There is Jesus' way to live, and there is the deeply religious way to live. Interestingly enough, they both kind of do the same stuff. And yet one is categorized as lawless, and those who don't know Christ at all. And the other is categorized as those who do the will of the Father. Listen to some of these things outside of the miraculous stuff mentioned in chapter 7. You go back to chapter 5, Jesus makes this statement about the scribes and the Pharisees: unless your righteousness surpasses theirs, you don't get to heaven. These are the guys who are the most religious guys anybody knows. These are like the go-to guys. For most people, this would have been like, typically when I talk to students, and particularly if they don't have a real religious commitments themselves, but they come from a family that does, I'll ask them, say, well, what's like the most rigorously Christian person you know? They always say, my grandmother. Granddads, I don't know what to do with that. And we're out of the picture on that one. It's all, I'm pretty sure my grandkids want to say the same thing. What about your grandfather? Nah. It's just my grandmother. And so it's always my grandmother, right? So this is Jesus pointing at like the ultimate grandma, right? Pointing at these people who meticulously keep the Torah, and he says, if this is all you've got, you don't make it. That's scary. That's terrifying. Listen to what they do. They never murder, right? But they do have anger in their heart against their brother. They never commit adultery, but they do lust after women. They cause other people to commit adultery. They swear by things greater than themselves to make themselves more significant. They don't pay others back an eye for an eye, perhaps, but they also never forgive their brother from their heart. They only love those and forgive those who are like them. They practice things like giving to the needy in chapter 6, 1 through 4. They pray in order to be thought of as spiritual in chapter 6, verse 5. They fast in order to be known as spiritual in chapter 6, 16 and 17. They judge others believing that they themselves won't be judged by the same standard, chapter 7, 1 through 5. And they teach openly that God will reward spiritual life based on merit in chapter 7, 15 through 20. They are workers of lawlessness, but everything I just read, giving to the needy, helping the poor. I grew up poor. I loved people that wanted to help me and my family. It was fantastic. But it's not the kind of thing that merits righteousness. All of these people are encapsulated by their own self-righteousness. These acts are done so that others will acknowledge them. Their perception as being righteous is part of their righteousness. And Jesus says that doesn't work that way. That never works that way. And Jesus begins portraying people who are changed from the inside out. That's the distinction. So Jesus portrays people as those who do the will of Father, as those who are poor in spirit in chapter 5, meek, humble, hungering and thirsting after righteousness, peacemakers, persecuted for the sake of righteousness because their lives are so obviously and tangibly attached to Jesus. They look and feel and sound like Jesus. And so the enemies of Jesus are now their enemies too. The ones who love Jesus now love them. They pray and they fast in secret. They give to the needy. They serve God and not money. They know Jesus and they trust He'll provide for them. They know that they deserve judgment, and they can only exercise judgment as those who are deserving of judgment. And even that only on Christians. They do to everyone what they wish that would be done to them. They live a life that is motivated from the inside out. The concept of doing the will of the Father is something that moves out of affection. I say this periodically in my classes, particularly my gen ed classes. And I do so, admittedly, just to kind of prod to see if I could get people to talk with me about it. But I always tell them, if it hadn't been for Christianity, I would have probably remained an atheist. I didn't find a great deal of value, nor do I still find a great deal of value in following religion. I think religion oftentimes is just an extension of cultural realities, an extension of political sort of imperialism. It's not something real in and of itself. But Christianity offered me something that nothing else did. Christianity did not say, here is the instruction, here's the prophet, here's the sage, here's the way to practice your good deeds, and hopefully you'll do enough to where you'll be accepted. Christianity said, Jeff, look in the mirror. You're never going to be good enough. You will never be as righteous as you are required to be. And so I'm going to come and rescue you. I'm going to rescue you from you. And Jesus comes into the world, and God, instead of condemning me, which I had every reason to be condemned, God instead exhausts His condemnation in the person of Jesus, and I die with Jesus, and then I am raised with Jesus by His grace. And I'm made into something brand new. Now, this new affection drives me. Do I pray and fast? Yes. Do I give to the needy? Yes. But it's not because I care if you like it or not. It's because I love them. There's nothing more liberating than being loved so profoundly and so deeply that you can love without restraint. There's nothing like it. That's what Jesus is talking about in this sermon. That's what drives those who do the will of the Father. New affections. This is being a grandparent, right? My grandkids have me wrapped around their finger. When I see my grandkids, I go bananas. My day is planned. If my grandkid ever walked into my Old Testament class, I would just look at everybody and go, class dismissed. I'm playing with my grandkid. My 3-year-old grandson, I just flew back from Alabama where I celebrated his third birthday. My 3-year-old grandson, my son looked at me as he was leaving me in the room with him by himself. He goes, Dad, don't let David eat that sandwich. I went, okay. He walked out. David walks right over to the sandwich, picks it up, starts eating it, and I thought, I should say something. I was like, hey, I think your dad told you not to eat the sandwich. My 3-year-old grandson looks at me. He's like, this is the most Mooney thing. He looked at me and went, shh. And I went, okay. What harm can a sandwich? It's a sandwich, of course. And so, I mean, that kid's just, got me wrapped around his finger. This new sense of affection drives me in a certain way. But you know what? It dawned on me when I became a grandfather that all of the most important relationships in my life did that to me. They all changed me. When I was my student's age, 18, 22 roughly, I lived for the affirmation of young ladies. I loved it when girls paid attention to me. And so I became funny when I figured out that they liked funny. And I became confident when I figured out that I liked confident. I couldn't grow hair, so I had to be funny. And when I met my wife, one of the things I did not anticipate would happen is I lost all interest in what any other woman thought about me. I didn't care. She liked me. That was enough. All of my most important relationships, if you think about it, all of your healthy relationships, some of you might be in unhealthy relationships, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about healthy relationships that are life-giving. They change you. They radically change you. They turn you into something very generous. And you all of a sudden realize how profoundly liberating that is. I remember I used to tell my kids, you said, even when my little girls were really small, I would get down in their face and I would say, do we need other little girls to tell us we're pretty to feel important? And they go, no, Daddy. I said, do we need little boys to tell us that we're pretty to feel important? No, Daddy. Who's the only boy that matters? Daddy. Yes, that's right. You can go to school now. It's like, and I would tell my kids, if you can free yourself from self-righteousness, free yourself from the need for affirmation, you can genuinely love people. Love people without need of being loved in return. That is what the gospel does to you. Except it does it to you on a grand scale. That's what Jesus means when he's talking about this deep and profound change that causes all of these things to happen. This is a life that is shaped over against religious hypocrisy. This is a life that's being loved so deeply that one's entire life is altered by the mark of those who are known by Jesus. It's knowing God as Father along with others. It's knowing Jesus so profoundly and so life-alteringly that you willingly undergo things like persecution, social displacement, the loss of all things. It's being other-oriented without needing accolades. It's being deeply, deeply in love and knowing that you have been loved. Not in some pedestrian way, but in a rugged, durable way. The thing that's so easy to do is to fall back into self-righteousness. It's to fall back into this idea. Let me give you a hint as to how you know you've done this. All of these things that are being talked about in here, these are all good things. Poor in spirit, meek, humble, hunger and thirst for righteousness, giving to the needy, praying and fasting, serving God, not money. All those things, when you fall back into self-righteousness, you begin to take those things out of the equation and set them aside and begin to choose what makes you righteous. But if you're genuinely in love, you can't do that. You can't decide what makes you righteous. Christ has made you righteous. Christ has reoriented reality to you. Christ isn't here to warm your heart. He's here to wreck your categories. He's here to reorient reality to you. And so if you live a life of generosity and mercy and forgiveness, but it's all coerced, it's not from Jesus. If you live a life that's marked by your own sense of what's right and wrong and sin and not sin, that's not from Jesus. If you live a life where you are able to have feelings of moral superiority over people that are like you, that is not from Jesus. If you hate or wish the demise of people of other religions or people that are different than us, that's not from Jesus. if you are a life that only sees Jesus as a condiment rather than a king, someone who just spices up your life, flavors your life, makes your life all the more interesting, but your own individual life, but you retain ownership, you retain sovereignty, you are what Jesus is talking about in this text, worker of lawlessness. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know you. To be known by Jesus is to be radically changed by Jesus. And not radically changed, perhaps in a sensational way. I wasn't. I don't have like a light in the night experience. When I became a Christian, I just fell beside my bed knowing full well that this sermon was preaching my condemnation, simultaneously preaching that I could be rescued. But by Jesus, not by moral reformation, not by conformity to somebody else's standard, but by throwing all of my good deeds and my bad deeds at the feet of Jesus and running to him with only hope in him, abandoning all hope in anything that I had hope in as God before and running to him. That was what I was being offered. And it was life-altering. And I spent days praying, and at some point I knew I was forgiven. And my life was never the same. It never has been the same. I struggle a while ago. The reason that I know what it looks like to go back and begin relying on self-righteousness is because that seems to be a habit of mine. I do this routinely. Another one is praying is the first thing that gets checked off the list. I don't have to do that. So if you don't pray and you're a Christian, there are loads of people in church history. Augustine, Luther, Calvin, Edwards most notably, that'll say to you, you're not a Christian if you don't pray. I'm not sure I would go quite that far. I would say this, you're not acting like one. You're acting not like the song that you were singing a while ago. I depend on you, I depend on you. You're saying, I actually don't need anything. I'll let you know. That's not the same thing. Workers of lawlessness pray so that people will notice them, but they have no value for prayer. So when nobody's watching, they have no reason to do it. Workers of lawlessness give to the needy when people are watching. That's the value, not the needy. You see what I mean? Those who do the will of the Father do so because their lives have been transformed from the inside out. They see profound value in Jesus. They see profound value in others. And they long for Jesus to be glorified, both in their lives and the lives of others, because of Jesus' great beauty and value. If you're here and you know that you would fall into that workers of lawlessness category, don't just try to displace that. You have to replace that. Replace it with the beauty of Jesus. Replace it with the strength and goodness of Jesus. It's the only thing that replaces it. If you don't do that, you'll simply displace that idol and bring on another one and convince yourself all the more that you're okay. And you're not. Throw yourself on the mercy of Christ. He never says no. He'll draw you in. He'll give you a home with him in his own heart. He'll embed you into the lives of people around you. Life-giving relationships that you would be impoverished without. This is the goodness of Jesus. The one who does the will of the Father is the one who is drawn to Christ by his very heart. I hope you are. Father, in the name of Christ, I thank you so much for these very good people. I pray that you would bless them and keep them. I pray for the grandparents. I pray that you would make much of yourself in all of the joy that they feel inside by being around their grandkids. I pray that this time that they have with their grandkids, that it would be life-giving and satisfying. And I pray that you would make much of yourself in that. I pray that you would bless these people, keep them, cause your face to shine on them, lift up your countenance upon them, and give them peace. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Spirit. Amen.